It's a beautiful Monday evening here in Lagos, Nigeria. And well, welcome to our viewers around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky criticizes Russia over its recent airstrikes on Ukraine, warning them not to target people with ballistic missiles. European leaders say they have a plan for peace in Ukraine, which they will present to U.S. President Donald Trump this week. Plus, it's the start of International Women's History Month, and Women's Day just days away. We begin conversations early. Let's begin the world today. Thanks again for joining us. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin about attacking his country while putting up the front that he's working towards peace. He was making the comment following more aerial attacks on Ukraine today. President Zelensky says in the past week more than 1,050 attack drones and almost 1,300 bombs and more than 20 missiles have been launched at Ukraine, including in Kharkiv overnight. Russia sent more than 80 drones overnight, and in one attack on Kharkiv, 8 people, including a 7-year-old, were injured, according to the city's mayor. Zelensky told Russia that if it wants talks, it must stop targeting people with ballistic missiles. Ukraine's security has been the main topic of discussions over the weekend, especially since a tense exchange at the White House on Friday with U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. Russia reacted to the heated exchange, accusing President Zelensky of a total lack of diplomatic ability. It also says a fragmentation of the West has begun. Reacting to the exchange on Friday, the man who could likely become Germany's next Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, says the exchange between the two presidents was a manufactured escalation. Reacting to the event to the media, Mr. Merz says it was not a spontaneous reaction to interventions by Zelensky, but obviously a manufactured escalation in this meeting in the Oval Office. He says Europe is now under pressure to act quickly. Well, Europe has now stepped up to the plate in settling a peace deal for Ukraine, showing themselves friendly. Also, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Sunday made that assurance at a security summit in Mannheim Estate on Sunday, attended by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as other European leaders. He says the UK, France and others have agreed to work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has entered the Security Summit for European leaders in London with a call to countries on the continent to do the heavy lifting with backing from the United States in ending the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attended the summit alongside other leaders at Mannheim Estate. In his press conference after the summit, the UK Prime Minister said the continent was at a crossroads in history. He unveiled that the UK, France and others have agreed to work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting, a plan that will be discussed with the US, and together they will take the plan forward.
Through my discussions over recent days, we've agreed that the UK, France and others will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. Then we'll discuss that plan with the United States and take it forward together. Our starting point must be to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position now, so that they can negotiate from a position of strength. And we are doubling down in our support.
Starmer said he did not accept that the US is an unreliable ally, as there are no two countries as closely aligned as the UK and the US. Earlier, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said discussions had been good and frank, and they had discussed the need for comprehensive security guarantees, including putting Ukraine in a position of strength and ensuring it has the means to fortify and protect itself. As for relations with the US, she said, "We're ready together with you to defend democracy, to defend the principle that there's rule of law, that you cannot invade your neighbor, or you cannot change borders with force."
Of course, security guarantees are of utmost importance for Ukraine, but we need comprehensive security guarantees. This includes that we have to put Ukraine in a position of strength, that it has the means to fortify and protect itself from the economic survival to the military resilience. It's basically turning Ukraine into a steel porcupine that is indigestible for potential invaders.
The meeting in London comes after US President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's altercation at the White House. Trump told Zelensky he was losing the war with Russia, among other things. For those watching in Kyiv, the future of their country hangs in a balance.
One of the issues raised at the tense meeting in the White House on Friday was about President Zelensky not being thankful for the U.S.'s help in this war with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a night address, insisted he was grateful for U.S. support. In his words, "Of course we understand the importance of America, and we are grateful for all the support we have received from the United States. There has not been a single day when we haven't felt grateful, because it is gratitude for the preservation of our independence. Our resilience in Ukraine is built upon what our partners do for us and for their own security." This followed talks in the UK on a peace plan. President Zelensky told reporters he was exchangeable as president in return for NATO membership, although the US president and President Putin of Russia have already ruled out such scenario in any peace talks, but he says replacing him is not simple. And more from that security summit in London on Sunday. The UK Prime Minister was asked if Britain would soon be at war with Russia after he pledged boots on the ground and planes in the air in Ukraine. Mr. Starmer emphasized that any deal that exists should be focused on preserving peace. He also blamed instability in the UK economy on the conflict in Ukraine.
The whole point of a guarantee for any deal, or if there is a deal, is to preserve the peace. And if you want to preserve the peace, you have to be prepared to defend the peace. So the reason I've been forward-leaning on this is because I want to avoid conflict, because I do not want conflict in Ukraine, in Europe, and certainly not in the United Kingdom. I want stability in the United Kingdom. The way to ensure that stability is to ensure that we are able to defend a deal in Ukraine, because the one thing our history tells us is that if there is conflict in Europe, it will wash up on our shores. And already in the last 3 years, what's happened in Ukraine has had a massive impact on many working people back here in the United Kingdom. There's been an instability in our economy caused by that conflict. So we are not unaffected by it. And of course, our own security and defence depends on the defence and security of Europe. So every step I am taking is in order to preserve peace, to avoid conflict, because the safety and security of the British people is my number one duty and responsibility, and I take it very seriously.
Well, Russian government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has been speaking on the renewing of ties between his president, that's Vladimir Putin, and the U.S. President Donald Trump, which he says remains strong and progress in relations to normalization can be made swiftly and effectively. According to the Kremlin speaker, both Russia and the U.S. are currently making efforts to repair their relations. But due to the damage caused in the past, there's still a long way to go. On February 24, the UN General Assembly adopted 2 draft resolutions on Ukraine, with Russia and the US voting together in favor. The European drafted one described a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, while the US one did not make accusations against Russia and emphasized the establishment of a lasting peace. 93 countries, including Serbia, voted in favor of the first, while 16, including the US and Russia, voted against it. The US proposed one also passed through Washington, although Washington abstained after European countries amended it to again make accusations against Russia. We'll be returning to discuss this in just a bit, but coming up after the break. Mother of 6-year-old abducted more than a year ago goes on trial in South Africa. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced the Department of Defense would be ordering its civilian workforce to outline 5 weekly accomplishments after pausing the plan on security grounds as part of the administration's plan to root out waste and inefficiencies. Initially, the Department of Defense employees were instructed to halt responses due to the sensitive nature of the work handled by the department, which includes national security, sensitivity, and classified information. However, following a review of Pentagon procedures and consultations with OPM, Hegseth announced the resumption of the request, directing each civilian employee to reply to the email outlining their accomplishments in 5 bullets and copying their immediate supervisors.
February 22nd of this year, OPM sent an email to all federal civilians asking them to provide, you remember this, approximately 5 bullets of what they did last week, describing their accomplishments. Well, the Department of Defense employees received direction to, at first, just initially pause responding to this request to OPM, just to pause. Now, as we said, following a review of Pentagon procedures and consultation with the Office of Personnel Management, because we work on topics of national security, of sensitivity, of classification, we needed to be careful on that front. I am now directing each member of the department's civilian workforce, just civilian, to provide those 5 bullets on what they accomplished in their specific jobs last week, to reply to that email and CC their immediate supervisors. It's a simple task, really, as Elon said, as the president recognized in our first cabinet meeting, just a pulse check. Are you there out to DoD civilians?
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is pausing its offensive cyber operations against Russia, according to officials, as a diplomatic push continues to end the war in Ukraine. The reason for the instruction has not been publicly stated. It's not clear how long the halt might last. The Defense Department has declined to comment. The directive reportedly came before Trump ended up in a televised row with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Friday. Since returning to office, Trump has markedly softened the American position towards Moscow in eagerness to reach a deal to end the war following Russia's full-scale invasion more than 3 years ago. He appeared to echo Moscow's justification for starting the war and announced plans to meet his counterpart, President Vladimir Putin. The U.S. has also sided with Russia during recent votes at the United Nations related to the war. At the same time, Trump has labeled Zelensky a dictator and accused the other man of gambling with World War III during Friday's blow-up in the Oval Office. One person has been killed, several others injured after a car drove into a crowd in the western German city of Mannheim, according to police. A suspect has been arrested and there's no evidence that anyone else is involved. Police and people, have been asked to avoid the area as emergency services attend the scene, but there is currently no danger to the public. One eyewitness who was sitting in a nearby restaurant tells local media all hell broke loose following the incident. Police have not specified whether the incident was deliberate or an accident. Germany has experienced several attacks in the past year. The UK death rate has reached a record low last year, according to executive analysis carried out for the BBC News. Mortality experts have looked at death certificates registered in 2024 and found that deaths per head of the population had returned to pre-pandemic levels and were slightly below the previous record in 2019. However, the new figure puts the UK back on its long-term trend of only gradual improvement. The research was carried out by analysts from the Continuous Mortality Investigation at the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. Our heavy rains have caused widespread flooding in KwaZulu-Natal, a province in South Africa. This has left hundreds of people without homes. Some have died, others missing. Graves have also been destroyed. Now, in 2022, the same province was hit by worst floods that claimed lives of about 409 people and thousands of homes were destroyed. Weather experts say that more rains are expected in KwaZulu-Natal this week. 3 children are among those who died in the provincial government. As the provincial government says, it's working towards accommodating those that have been affected. Our correspondent, Innocent Samosa, brought this in.
Well, greetings to you, colleague, and our viewers around the world. Indeed, devastating news coming out of KwaZulu-Natal. In fact, the heavy rainfall continues to batter the eThekwini municipality and surrounding areas. Now, this, of course, it has led to severe flooding and multiple road closures as of Sunday. Now, we do know, colleague, that the South African Weather Services has now upgraded the weather alert to level 5 warning. This, of course, speaks to intensified downpours, strong winds, and of course potential hail in that province. But we do know now that the families whose loved ones' graves were damaged by the floods in Durban are demanding that their remains be removed from the Wentworth cemetery in Durban. For some, they say that it's not the first time that severe weather, have affected graveyards in Durban. They take back to speaking about the fact that after the 2002 floods, many families had to rearrange and fix the graves of their loved ones. Now they're saying that this should be the last time that their families go through such trauma. But we do know that the disaster management team in the province are on high alert. They say that they're on high alert following the level 5 warning. This, of course, is an orange color. It shows that it's actually one of the very, very severe weather in that particular province. But also the South African Weather Services has urged people to stay at home, has urged even parents not to force their kids to go to school. But that also, colleague, it has sparked a lot of debates on social media. In fact, some civil society groups are saying that it cannot be that kids cannot go to school because of flooding, because the roads are not safe. In fact, they say that the bridges, the infrastructure should be such that is, can handle such, severe weathers, so that kids can basically go to school. But the update now from the officials, we heard that 6 people have now died, have now lost their lives due to this particular flooding in that particular province. We're told that it's going to be raining. It's going to be like this. The situation won't change until the end of the week. So that goes to show that if the kids are not going to school, they will basically lose a bit of time, their colleague. But we're told that the disaster management team have high alert as to the issues that has to do with flooding in that particular province. And we do know that the officials in President Ramaphosa's office, they will indeed be visiting KwaZulu-Natal to just see the extent of the damage. We do know now, colleague, that in fact we're told that the damage runs into millions of rands. The roads are damaged. Infrastructure is nowhere to be found, for a lack of a better term. So we trust that the officials will go and assess the damage and perhaps, not waste time. In fact, not waste time in terms of dealing with that particular damage in that province. Colleague?
Thank you, Innocent Samosa, for the updates on the floods in KwaZulu-Natal and the weather reports about more heavy rains in the area. Let's return to our lead story now, and that is the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanking the U.S. and other partners for their help in this war against Russia following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Russian military conducting airstrikes on Ukraine today. At least 1,300 bombs have been dropped in Ukraine since last week, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. About 80 of those air drones were sent into Ukraine overnight, following the summit for peace in Ukraine on Sunday, called by the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. There were other European leaders at the meeting as well. The European Commission President Volodymyr we call her VDL, von der Leyen, Ursula von der Leyen, beg your pardon, was at that meeting, as well as the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the Italian Prime Minister and other leaders were at that meeting, including the French President Emmanuel Macron. He and the UK Prime Minister will be presenting a plan that was agreed at the UK summit to the US President Donald Trump. I want to bring in now political and international affairs analyst, Professor Femi Otubanjo. He's here in Lagos. He'll be joining us remotely. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program today. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says a plan has now been agreed with inputs from the Ukrainian president, of course. This will be presented to President Trump sometime this week or maybe even next week. Does Europe really need to rely on the US to make this plan work?
Yes, they do. Of course, UN, the US is the backbone of NATO. And this, while this meeting by the British Prime Minister, convened by the British Prime Minister, is not, strictly speaking, a NATO meeting, but it is within that context of a European platform that this position is being taken. And again, background of what happened between Zelensky and the US president, there's always the need for some
Professor, we're having a hard time hearing you. It does appear there does seem to be, some, the networks don't seem to be working with us today. We'll return to the conversation with Professor Femi Otubanjo. In the meantime, the mother of a 6-year-old girl who disappeared more than a year ago in South Africa has gone on trial, accused of organizing her kidnapping. Kelly Smith, her boyfriend Jackin Appelis, and their friend Stevino Van Ryn were arrested after Smith's daughter, Jocelyn, went missing from outside her home in Saldanha Bay near Cape Town in February of last year. Jocelyn's disappearance sent shockwaves across South Africa, and despite a highly publicized search for her, she's yet to be found. All three have pleaded not guilty to charges of human trafficking and kidnapping. Ms. Smith initially said that Jocelyn had gone missing after she left the young girl in Apollis's care. Prosecutors later accused her of having sold, delivered, or exchanged the 6-year-old and lied about her disappearance. Well, At least one person was killed, 3 others and dozens more affected as flash floods triggered by heavy rains swept through Pinas in Ecuador's coastal province of El Oro. Pictures released showing the event on Saturday showed houses being extensively damaged and the area completely devastated. Locals were also seen clearing mud at some point, debris from their houses and from the streets. By nightfall, authorities were still working to clear debris and restore the main road that connects the canton to the rest of El Oro province. One of the residents in El Oro said that when he realized the avalanche came and dragged her, all he did was to hold on to the light pole and stay there until the avalanche passed and was able to get into the house. Currently, 400 people have been affected, with some finding shelter in Jose Gallardo, Mososco, Coliseum. Local reports say the volunteers have been providing food and medical assistance to the affected. Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa stated the government is committed to assisting those affected by the landslide without delay. He has ordered the immediate deployment of all state institutions, emphasizing they will not wait or debate over jurisdiction.
Sí, ¿se sabe el nombre? No la sabe.
Muertes, desgraciadamente, tenemos la pérdida.
Low-lying areas of tombs in northwestern Peru have been inundated with water after heavy rains caused one of the country's largest rivers to burst its banks and flood the city. Authorities draining the deluge from waterlogged streets they're shown by, as well as locals taking stock of their damage in homes. These are the pictures that we saw on Saturday. Water has undoubtedly entered the homes, and they currently have 2-inch water pumped helping to drain the water. This was as of Saturday. The deputy manager of the provincial municipality of Tombs was explaining exactly what the situation is. Now, the flow of the Tombs River exceeds 1,770 cubic meters, and it continues to rise. Authorities are now on high alert, saying the flood defenses were only built to withstand 1,700 cubic meters. The floods have left residents reeling, with some saying that they feel uncertain a local government will be able to offer them some assistance. One of the respondents said that she feels devastated because there is no contingency plan. There are no water pumps that can help all the affected people. In response to the rise in tides of the Tombs River, the Regional Emergency Operations Center has issued an alert after receiving the latest reports from the Hydrological Monitoring Network of the National Service of Meteorology and Hydrology of Peru. We're off on another break on The World Today. Still ahead. Well, this will leave you feeling better after all the stories that we have read of doom and gloom. Time to dress those dogs up. Right in time for the local event in Rio. Stay with us. Welcome back. Our focus on Africa now, as the Democratic Republic of Congo says it's standing firm on its decision not to have direct talks with the M23 rebel group, a group that has made major advances in the east of the country in recent months. Despite growing international pressure, DR Congo Prime Minister Judith Suminwa Tuluka says her government wants to negotiate with neighboring Rwanda, which it accuses of backing the M23. Last week, the UK government added the calls for the group to be part of an inclusive dialogue to help find a political solution to the conflict. At least 8,500 people have been killed since fighting escalated in January, according to the Congolese authorities. Hundreds of thousands have also been forced from their homes amid the chaos triggered by the fighting, which the UN experts and others see Rwanda as having a key role. All families fleeing the violence in the DRC continue to cross into Burundi seeking safety. In just 2 weeks, over 60,000 people have arrived in Burundi, fleeing deadly conflict in eastern DRC. Many of them were already displaced inside the DRC. They're now forced to seek safety across the border, majority of them women and children. This number is likely to increase as hostilities in the DRC advance towards the town of Uvira, close to the main official border crossing into Burundi. The UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, says it welcomes the government of Burundi's decision to grant prima facie refugee status to those fleeing the conflict, ensuring their swift access to protection and critical humanitarian assistance. Brigitte Mukanga-Eno, the UNHCR representative in Burundi, recently met refugees who arrived in Kaburantwa to hear their concerns and assess the situation there. Refugees are being transferred to the Musenyi refugee site in the southeast of the country, which has a capacity for about 10,000 people.
We have been receiving refugees from the DR Congo for the past few weeks, but the largest number of refugees started arriving essentially around the 14th, the weekend of the 14th of February, where we got a high number of people crossing from the Rusizi River into Burundi. We are planning to start moving people from here to the location that the government has provided, which is at the refugee settlement in Musenyi. Musenyi is in the province of Rutana, away from the border. So that will be for the safety of everyone.
Staying in Africa, the Under-Secretary General for UN Peace Operations has just concluded a visit to South Sudan. Speaking at a press conference in Juba, Mr. Lacroix, who described his tour as busy and constructive, urged continued support and commitment to South Sudan, especially as it enters the fourth extension of its transitional period, which began on February 22nd, 2025. The top UN official had sat at several high-level meetings in Juba, the South Sudanese capital, including with President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar. He acknowledged the significant challenges that the country is facing as it struggles to show tangible progress in implementing the 2018 peace deal.
Key purpose of my visit was to convey an important message, actually the fundamental message, which is the continued support and continued commitment of the entire UN family to South Sudan, especially as it enters the fourth extension of its transitional period amidst a variety of challenges. We have spoken at length about current security and humanitarian concerns, intercommunal conflict, and the road to election as part of the implementation of the peace agreement, and vitally our ongoing efforts as the UN to assist the government of South Sudan in holding credible, fair, and peaceful elections in December 2026. There is also the impact of the Sudanese conflict on South Sudan, both in terms of the number of IDPs, the number of refugees, returnees, the impact on the economy, the potential impact on security in South Sudan. So obviously, the conflict in South Sudan is adding to the already existing domestic challenges of South Sudan. Completing a peaceful democratic transition is a common goal between South Sudan and the international community. And certainly, it's a goal that we share. But it is the South Sudanese themselves, and first and foremost, their authorities, who must do the heavy lifting. As the UN, we're here to assist them in every way we can on their journey to a permanent peace.
The Muslim holy month of Ramadan has begun worldwide for the next 29 or 30 days or so. Muslims observing the fast will refrain from eating and drinking from dawn to dusk, a period lasting from 12 to 16 hours, depending on their location. Here in Africa, many countries began on the 1st of March, welcoming the month in different ways.
As the month of Ramadan begins, the central mosque in Goma, North Kivu, stands nearly deserted. The recent capture of the city by M23 rebels has intensified insecurity, prompting many residents, including a significant portion of the Muslim community, to flee. Despite the ongoing crisis, a handful of devoted worshippers continue to gather at the mosque. Sheikh Suleiman, an imam at the mosque, says they will observe Ramadan no matter the situation. Before the M23 advanced, the mosque was a bustling center of worship. Now many have sought refuge in neighboring countries, while others stay away due to security concerns. In Senegal, hundreds of Muslims gathered at the mosque in Dakar on Saturday, March, in the evening for the first Tarawih prayer, marking the start of Ramadan. They prayed at the Masaliku Dejani Mosque, while the local Imam, Sheikh Abdul Baraka, delivered the Tarawih prayer. This year's Ramadan officially began in Senegal on Sunday, March the 2nd. Islam is reportedly practiced by over 90% of the population across the country. The mosque, defined as the biggest in West Africa, was officially unveiled in 2019, attracting thousands of Muslims. In Côte d'Ivoire, dozens of worshippers flocked to the Mohammed VI Mosque in the capital, Abidjan, on Saturday to attend the prayer on the first evening of Ramadan. The prayer was held at the Mohammed VI Mosque, which was inaugurated in Abidjan last April, under the cooperation of Morocco's Mohammed VI Foundation of African Ulema and the Ivorian authorities. Worshippers say the mosque's interior greatly contributes to the praying experience. Other Muslims from overseas also expressed joy to take part in the prayer, conveying gratitude for the chance to celebrate the month with the Ivorian Muslim community. Feeding the poor and vulnerable is one of the characteristics of Ramadan. Dozens of locals queued for free meals at Imam Ahmed Raza Jame Masjid on Sunday, as mosques and community organizations across Johannesburg mobilized to combat hunger in one of the city's most impoverished areas, serving free hot meals to hundreds daily during Ramadan. Locals wait for food outside and inside as volunteers stir large pots of halim, chicken akni, and biryani, filling containers as staff distribute meals and bread to those in need.
Our aim is to make sure that we feed our community and make sure that everyone is well fed, especially now in the month of Ramadan. We are living in a poverty-stricken environment where people are struggling for food, for daily food, and our center is here to feed and help people in need.
Lenasia South, plagued by 35% unemployment rate and rising food prices, has seen demand for aid surge.
We give them halim, and we give them, we do like a chicken akni, biryani, and we are doing this whole month of 30 days, iftar and supper, daily, 30 days. In the month of Ramadan, like if you look now, we do like 25 days on Saturday, 25 days on Sunday, 50 days over the weekend. That's 200 days for the month. And daily cooking we do. We serve the community, those who are in need, they come. Alhamdulillah. So full 30 days of cooking non-stop, serving humanity.
Ramadan for Muslims around the world commemorates the first revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. Throughout the month, they perform night prayers and fast from dawn to dusk as a sign of devotion and self-discipline.
And we have entered the International Women's History Month, an important reminder for the contributions that women have made towards society, culture, and history. Its principles focus on celebrating women's achievements and striving for a world with gender equality. Later this week, on March 8th, there will be the International Women's Day. The theme is For All Women and Girls, Rights, Equality, Empowerment, a call to action demanding equal rights, power and opportunities for all, where no one is left behind. That's according to the United Nations. I want to bring in now communications consultant and founder, Nigerian Women in PR, Tolulope Olorundero. Tolulope, it's great to have you on the program today.
Thank you for having me on the program today.
And we really appreciate your being here. And I know you're really passionate about women's issues. I mean, this was a conversation we're having a few weeks back about, talking about the contributions of women being out there, not just talking about their contributions, but actually celebrating these women. So what does International Women's Day mean to you?
International Women's Day is, well, a month really, not even just a day, but it's an opportunity to focus exclusively on women and their impact in society, in business, and even in families. Because sometimes most of the time during International Women's Day and month, we seem to focus a lot on women who are in business or women who are in politics, and sometimes overlook women who contribute significantly to the success and advancement in their own families, women who are homemakers, who are focusing on childcare, but they do a lot. So women across board, whether you are in business, whether you are in industry, or whether you're in politics, March is a month for us to celebrate ourselves and for society also to recognize the impact that women have made in the society across board. And so for me, it's a time where I get my flowers. Sometimes they say, oh, let's give you your flowers. Make sure you celebrate people when they can still be here to appreciate it. March is that month when you can say to a woman, well done, and you actually mean it.
Yes, you're right, of course. The important discussions that we need to have. And it just seems like only 1 month is given to these discussions. It doesn't seem like it is enough. But we have decided here every day of this month, or possibly every week of this month, we will be raising women's issues. So let's talk about the gender gap, which is what usually comes up during celebrations like this. It's highlighted every year. And at this moment, I really can feel the men rolling their eyes at this question every time you mention gender gap and gender equality. And it's because it is such an important issue to women. Why has it been difficult to balance this?
Well, lots of factors, really. First of all, no matter the eyes rolled or the sentiment it raises, the reality is that there is a gender gap. There is a pay gap because of that gender distribution. There is a gap, right? And now there are lots of efforts. There's been improvement in filling that gap, but it is still there, and there are many organizations, many initiatives still carrying out advocacy functions and doing programs just to bring more sensitization to this. This is beyond he or she, men who support women initiatives. It is the reality on ground. And until we get to that point where it is no longer something that people roll their eyes about, but accept that that's the reality and begin to put measures in place to make sure that people actually put in the work to close that gap. One of the things I'm very passionate about is when we have Women's Month like this, you have organizations having programs, you have conferences, you have summits, you have workshops. Oh, it's Women's Month, let's celebrate them. Sometimes I see that as just ticking the box. Oh, they said we should do it, therefore we're doing it. After March 8th, after March of every year, what does your organization look like? Even within the families, it is not about, oh, they said let's celebrate women this month. Okay, my wife, on March 8th, I'm going to buy you a gift. After March 8th, how are you actually empowering that woman to reach her full potential? That is what March 8th, Women's Month, Women's Day, that is really what it is about. Yes, on that specific day, we focus on the issues raised, but generally it is a call to action. It is a call to make everybody more aware, to be committed to supporting and empowering women, not just those you see from afar, even those around you, from your daughters to your wives, to your sisters, to your mothers, right? When you talk about things like inheritance tax, or when widowed women should remarry, and you have their adult sons saying, no, my mother should remain alone. That is what Women's Month wants to draw attention to. There will be a focal theme for each year, but ultimately it is an encouragement to make sure that women's rights become entrenched as fundamental human rights, and that they have access to everything every other person in the society has access to.
Yeah, and I think you're re-emphasizing what Hillary Clinton, the former U.S. First Lady, said at the Beijing conference that women's rights are human rights. And I hate to say this as well, highlighting this particular issue, but we're still in the era when women, the burden of proof is on women to prove sexual assault and harassment. I mean, you've been watching the news recently. There is a case right now in the Senate. What can better help with having conversations like these and to prevent, having to put women in a difficult position where they have to prove things that really cannot be, you honestly cannot prove, really, but it happened, but you really cannot prove.
Absolutely. Well, so it's a very topical issue in Nigeria now because of the situation on ground. But how I will address it from a communications perspective is to first put out a call to fellow women. Please don't be the plug in the wheel when a woman says, I have been harassed. Please don't allow yourself to be used as a voice to ask her, prove it. I mean, you are a woman. If I had that conversation in my house, I think it was just yesterday, with my husband just trying to say that, there are some things you can't prove. Just sending an unsolicited nude to a woman is sexual harassment, right? So if you're not able to understand those soft inputs, things that constitute harassment to a woman, then you will have fellow women saying, but what did you do? How did you do it? What's the big deal? He only made an offer. If you didn't accept it, so what's the big deal? No. If a woman has positioned herself or is in a certain space and has not invited that type of conversation, if a man or anybody really, because the way the world is going now, anybody can make such advancements. If she has not demonstrated in any way willingness to participate in such conversation, it is harassment, much more so on the job. Whether you're a politician, whether you're in business, anywhere you find yourself as a woman, first, please make sure that you are not used as a voice to silence other women who are saying, I have been harassed. Let the men speak up for themselves. If somebody is saying that you have harassed me, the man should please step forward. And that's the other part as well, because I'm a mother of boys and I've also been keenly following conversations about sexual harassment online since COVID and post-COVID period. There's been a lot of cases where women come out and say, oh, this is my experience. And 1 year down the line, they recount their testimonies. Right. What I will say is that everybody has a right to fair hearing. But if out of the bat, once she says it, we start to discredit her. We start to think about, we start to mention things that, oh, she may have done in the past. Therefore, if she's now experiencing harassment, or it's because of what she did, it's not a big deal. No, particularly it should not be women who are carrying up arms to say, but what did you two do? Why do you look this certain way? Why did you wear this? That should not be language, that should not be things coming from other women. Let the people who are so accused have an opportunity to defend themselves.
It still is a very difficult conversation to be had, and I really admire, your courage coming on the program today to discuss this. Tolulope Olorundero, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Amarachi.
And as we close the program, the coastal neighborhood of Barra di Tijuca hosted the Blockout event on Saturday, a canine street party. How adorable. They brought together dogs and their owners as part of Rio's carnival celebrations. We're looking at dozens of dogs dressed as superheroes, clowns, and cartoon characters parading alongside their owners. The event organizer, Marco Antonio Vieira, known as Toto, said Rio's carnival makes you want to hit the streets, and here you can bring your dog and enjoy it with your family. This carnival lets you bring your dogs so both humans and dogs can enjoy it. Participants like Luisa and Marielle, very enthusiastic. They're carnival attendees. They said it was great to create the costumes, obviously made it themselves, and just to see the reaction of people as they watch their dogs dressed in the costumes. The local event highlights the inclusivity and joy of Rio's carnival, allowing everyone, including these four-legged friends, to join in the festivities. Well, I don't know if those dogs, any one of them, will ever remember having this much fun at the Rio Carnival, or even remember they attending the carnival. But thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. See you tomorrow.